personality and democracy. Human face, which is, on one hand, the noblest creation of Allah the Almighty, and the served of the entire universe, has in his nature on the other, to treat any exalted and powerful being as the center and an object of worship, and this demand of human nature leads him to the concept of oneness of God and to worship one God by rejecting all other false gods. The greatest satanic cunningness and deception was that man put heredity and lineage as precondition for getting throne and forming government. It resulted in undeserving persons not capable of kingship to become kings and look down upon those who really deserved it. This blunder of mankind gave birth to many evils, corruption and disruption, and the children of Adam had to bear the brunt thereof. The noble Quran, after being revealed, and Muhammad, after being commissioned as prophet, remedied the evil, and this embodiment of the total human qualities, himself led the people of the state and thus put before the world at large best example of the blend of prophethood and temporal rule at a time. He explained to the humankind the duties of a king and his realm of power. After him, his foremost trained and benefited band, the noble companions, elected the best among them to rule over them in line with the teachings of the Prophet. Thus, for the first time, broke the satanic spell that heredity could ever play a role in making one a ruler. The choice of Umar Farooq after Uthman Ghani was also chosen without any consideration of heredity and lineage, but some individuals and sections of the people had some reservation about it, and Uthman Ghani himself did some favor to his relatives and the people of his own tribe. Hence, his period was not without trials and tribulations. Thus, it may be safely said that as the Prophet Muhammad presented his example as a messenger for 23 consecutive years to redeem humanity, so also from to 10 AH, for about 10 years, he put before the world glaring example of righteous rule. And as the 23 years of the Prophet are worth following for mankind, so the Madnian life of the Prophet, the Caliphate of Abu Bakr Siddiq and the Caliphate of Umar Farooq put together and spreading over a span of 23 years, are also worthy of being emulated. At the end of the righteous Caliphate, human weakness and satanic swindling once again made hereditary relations necessary for succeeding to the kingdom or rule. And the rule, instead of going to the able and deserving, was unfortunately came to be considered as the right of some particular dynasties. Thus, the unworthy sons of worthy fathers appeared, gracing the thrones or seats of power. The people of those period had to undergo untold miseries and sufferings to get rid of such evil and despotic rulers. At last, their patience being exhausted, they took recourse to the democracy practiced in France and America today. Although like hereditary autocratic rules, democracies also cannot prove a source of blessing for mankind. The only type of government corresponding to human nature and a source of peace and blessing for mankind is one whose model came to be seen in the first 4 centuries of the Hijra era. And that is, in fact, the system that lies between democracy and autocracy. Democratic rule. In a democratic setup, a person is elected by the people for a period of 3 or 5 years, and he is called either the President of the Republic. Does not enjoy the same powers which is required by an affectionate ruler of mankind. Even in some ordinary matters the President feels helpless and has to work against his will. It means the government has no real center of power, and government affairs are divided in a manner that they go to belong to all the people of the state. When seen from a distance, this system of government looks pleasant. And since the people generally find themselves ruling over themselves and feel that the chains of despotism or tyrannical rule are broken, they are happy with the system, but ultimately they are put to human sense of nobility lies against unbridled freedom. This is the reason that in France and America, where democratic system is working, the spiritualism desired by the religion is going to the dogs. High morals taught by religion cannot grow and flourish in a country where the flood of democracy is surging. Democratic system of government seeks to put man on a path of such an unnatural freedom that he can no longer retain his divine values. Pure democratic system is, in fact, a very strong movement of atheism and secularism. As nothing grows in a desert, fish can't live out of water, and man cannot keep healthy in a dark place and polluted air, in the same way, religious thoughts, restraints and prayers cannot stay and grow in a democratic system of government. The fundamental principle of religion is restraint and obedience. And one's following of a true religion keeps intact the true feeling of human nature that every high and respectable being is to be given a high place and shown respects, and since Allah the Almighty is the highest of all, one should bow down before him saying Subhana Rabbi Allah, glorified be the Lord, the Most High. Every messenger, every prophet and every guide in the world has rightly demanded that all men should obey him and carry out his command. And none can deny that human race has always achieved success simply by following and obeying those messengers, prophets, guides and leaders. It is a fact that human race has reached the stage of progress and development from the lowest level of disgrace and depravity. Thus, the system of government which is injurious to the righteous course and sets humanity free from all decent and reasonable restraints, can his son to obey him, and it also behooves the son to do so. Every teacher wants his pupils to obey him, and the same is demanded of disciples, followers and soldiers, and they must respond to the call in their own interest. But, under the effect of democracy, every son, pupil, disciple, follower and soldier looks upon obedience to his father, teacher, saint, leader and commander as a matter of an unpleasant duty to be performed against one's will. And by, all these things are so dissolved that man finds before him nothing but atheism and secularism, which ultimately lead to barbarism. Democracy is basically against sense of religiosity, and hence the more this sense is injured, the more there is chance for peace to go out of sight. Real peace can be established on earth only through religion, but governments have always eaten humble pie in this field. Inside houses, in forests, deserts and pathways, a man is free from the watchful eyes of the police. It is religion alone and not the government which can hold one back from indulging in evil acts of murder, theft, adultery. If all the inhabitants of the earth turn secular, it will become a hell for mankind by freely adopting the course of killing and carnage, theft, adultery, lies, deception, mischief and unmannerly behavior. In the democracies of Europe and America, we find nothing which could create a sense of envy in us. These are the countries where more irreligiousness is found. In these very countries, human society is more inclined to immodesty, and it is here that breach of promise, disloyalty, self-centeredness, falsehood, deceit etc. have become ingredients of their character. Democratic government can never give birth to any Napoleon, Kaiser, William, Julius Caesar, Timur, Hannibal, Saladin, Suleiman Kanuni, Sher Shah, Alamgir. And, in case one is born, he cannot remain alive, what to speak of the birth of Khalid bin Walid. It is, perhaps, the most ugly example of human depravity that we, today, find even Muslims desiring of European and American type of democracy, which is totally against the teachings of Islam and something highly injurious to mankind. Such a shift in Muslim thought is the result of the timidity and lack of courage, and it is reduced to such a state because of ignorance and ignoring the teachings of the Quran and Hadith. Autocratic hereditary rule: when a person ascends the throne, his blood relation and natural love demand that his son, being inheritor of his property and possessions, should also be his successor as a king. But this is his sheer mistake, for kingship is not his property but a trust entrusted to him by his country and nation. Hence he is not within his rights to put his rule to his disposal and pass it on to anybody at will. A trust is always consigned to its real master. Hence, it is up to the nation to hand it over to any tested and trusted person most suitable to the job. But it requires utmost courage and very strong resolution to hold the king back from committing breach of trust and confidence. Such dauntless courage can be produced by Islam alone, which it has done through the ages, and what the Prophet had implanted into his companions. The Muslims evaded teachings of Islam with the result they lost much of their courage, determination and ambition which Islam had produced in them in the past, and hence, they could not put a check on their rulers. Instead, they shut their eyes to the misappropriations of their rulers in every department of life. At last, the ugly practice of forming autocratic hereditary rule, which was obliterated during the righteous caliphate, was once again brought back to life, and the Muslims as a whole had to bear the brunt of their agreeing to wrong practice. Hereditary crown princeships' unreasonable and praiseless practice so often paved the way for most of the unworthy and incapable persons to become rulers of the Muslims, persons who were even lacking in the qualities of getting a seat in the assembly of worthy and civilized men. Certainly there should be only one ruler or caliph or king of the Muslims, but he must be the best among them, and they elect him with general agreement or majority opinion. Anybody's birth in the house of a caliph or king doesn't mean that he has necessary abilities to make a worthy ruler. Had this practice of hereditary rule not been permitted, and the Islamic concept of governance and the ruling system had been as well guarded as it was during the righteous caliphate, the Islamic rule and the Muslims would not have reduced to such a sad plight we see today. But it was the will of Allah, and hence it came to pass. Had the Muslims opposed it right from the beginning and not slackened their efforts to keep it intact, then although they had to give supreme sacrifices at the outset, but later, none would have mustered courage enough to get his son elected to the throne or declared him his successor. Abu Bakr had more than one worthy son to make a good ruler, but he found Umar best among the Muslims and recommended his name for the next caliph. Abdullah the son of Umar was, undoubtedly, worthy of being the caliph after his father, but since Omar Farouk was essentially bent upon uprooting this evil practice, issued command that Abdullah bin Umar should, in no case, be elected caliph. The greatest folly and blindness of people is that they see with their naked eyes the evils of autocratic rule, but still never take the trouble of going deep the causes of these evils. By opposing autocracy, they start praising democracy. The main cause behind the evils of autocratic rule is that it had made room for heredity and snatched away from the people the right to elect the ruler of their own choice. Thus, it is the demand of reason that first of all the origin of all evils, the system of hereditary rule, be debarred from making entry to the sphere of human activity. They should make it a point not to allow at any cost the son of a ruler to succeed if he is not worthy of becoming one. And he should be elected with consensus or majority opinion even if he deserves the throne or seat of power. What sort of wisdom it is to commit another such mistake to avoid one? It is the timidity and lack of courage on the part of the public that encouraged the despotic and unworthy rulers to go unbridled. The obedience shown with a sense of duty is far apart from one which is done out of cowardice. To make it more clear, we can cite the example of Umar, whose governors would say that they felt Umar's one hand below and another about the jaws, and he would tear our jaws apart on slight deviation from the prescribed course. Khalid bin Walid receives the order of Umar Farouk, and he very silently obeys it in spite of being a commander of great victories. Umar is on the other hand challenged right on his pulpit, and a very common and ordinary person examines his honesty and trusteeship. A woman listens to Umar's speech regarding bridal money and has the courage to raise objection against a point therein, and the commander of the faithful had to admit from his pulpit that even the women of Al-Madinah could inform him of his mistake. Now, one can easily think of the sort of obedience shown to Umar and compare it with the kind of obedience shown to the last Mughal kings in the courts and in the very country they ruled. Royal orders were not carried out not only in the Punjab, Sindh, Deccan, Bengal and other provinces, but underscore also in Agra, Allahabad and Delhi. The type of rule Islam has formed on this earth is known as autocratic. Democratic rule. The system of rule suggested by Islam lies between pure democracy and pure autocracy. Every Islamic section has its say in the election of caliphate, king or ruler. In the election of the most suitable and most deserving person for the rule or caliphate, all possible fair means should be made use of, and the best person to be elected at all costs. The Muslims need no institution of law or constitution or formation of any modern system of government, for they possess the noble Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Thus the task of electing best man for the job is also not difficult for the Muslims. The man who knows the Quran and Hadith more and acts more upon them is the most deserving of all to become the ruler of the Muslims. To run the administration according to the teachings of the Quran and Hadith and to enforce divine and prophetic commands are the main duties of a Muslim ruler. The Muslims have every right to challenge their rulers if and when he makes even slight deviation from the path set by Allah and His Messenger, but it is incumbent on each and every Muslim to follow every order of the ruler, if it is not contrary to the dictates of the Quran and the Sunnah, without even thinking to revolt against the ruler. In case a Muslim ruler shows sign of deviation from the right path, he may be deposed then and there. But if he carries out his duties to his nation with divine sense and good intentions, his deposition would be the height of idiocy after passing a tenure of 3 or 5 years. The caliph of the Muslims happens to be the servant, watchman, guard and trustee of the Muslims. Why should then we remove him from a position wherefrom he is serving the Muslims with all the power at his command just for plunging in the trouble of a new experiment? The Muslims do not want their caliph to enact laws for them nor allow him to pass a luxurious life at the cost of public exchequer. The caliph of the Muslims, under a moderate and reasonable system, collects wealth from the wealthy section in reasonable proportion and spends it on the poor, the needy and the orphan for their welfare. Since a reasonable tax is collected from the wealthy section to be given to the needy, there is no chance of any conflict arising between the capitalists and the laborers, which has, now, taken the whole Europe in its grip. The caliph of the Muslims is the guard and watchman of the Muslims as well as their teacher, guide, commander, servant and king. In important matters and national affairs, for instance, if an enemy country is to be invaded or peace is to be brought about with the hostile power, or troops to be sent to help any people or for protecting the Muslims, or keeping peace in the country, the caliph has to hold consultations with the Muslims, for the Quran had ordained him to do so. But the purpose of consultation is not to force the Muslim ruler to toe their line by holding back his own. The sole purpose of such consultation is that the caliph should listen to favorable and unfavorable opinions about the issue and then form his own opinion in the light of wise counsels. The Quran says, "And consult them in the affairs. Then when you have taken a decision, put your trust in Allah." 3:159. The model of the system of government Islam wants to set up, as mentioned above, may be seen in the era of the righteous caliphate. After that, the system of rule changed into autocratic hereditary one. However, the bright points of Islamic teachings and morality kept glaring out the rules established by the Muslims, and taken as a whole, the type of rule set up by the Muslims has no parallel in the annals of history. Democratic governments whose example Europe and America are presenting today, can never come at par with the type of rule Islam wants to establish.